Our ancient text today involves a mystical experience that resulted in a human being, Isaiah, being turned around and shaped and formed for leadership. It could also be the new phase of what's going on in community organizing, what we might call community organizing and leadership as a spiritual practice. Isaiah is changed into a spiritual leader. Mystical experiences and social leadership rarely twain, but here they do. Isaiah has an experience he can't forget with something called seraphim. Now, a seraphim is in the celestial order the highest form of an angel. They often have baby faces, and they have wings. They don't have bodies, and they often have some inner light coming out from them. In this case, they have coals that they can come and touch your lip and make you magically into something that you weren't before they touched you. They burn a vision into Isaiah using coals, and he agrees to follow God reluctantly. Very few biblical characters ever say yes to God, like, sure. Mostly they say, you've got to be kidding, there's got to be somebody else, it's not me. And so Isaiah begins to begin complaining because he's been asked by the seraphim, and therefore the Almighty, to literally go into the Supreme Court of his day and to lead, to help people see what's going on. And there, in that supreme court, he discovers there's something more supreme than that court. And there he wields the power and authority on behalf of the Almighty. Why would anybody do that? The only possible reason is exposure to alternative reality so strong that it makes you unafraid of the thing you used to be most afraid of. You are no longer afraid of entering those places of great strength and power and authority because you know and you have been touched, you've been burned by a higher and alternative power and authority. So I had a weird experience that does connect, but you won't see till later. I got rejected from a study that I wanted to be a part of at the Johns Hopkins University. The ad appeared in the Christian Century asking for clergy who were ordained, who would be willing to take magic mushrooms or psilocybin in a controlled study to see if chemically induced experience would have any impact on their future as clergy. Seriously. I'm not kidding. And in the web version of the sermon, you can see what all, and NYU is in on this too. They wanted to find out if having the mystical experience of an alternative reality over time would turn you into a more convicted clergy person. They wanted to know what would happen to your call if you had this experience of the drug. You go to Maryland, you take the drug in a nice parlor, and then for the next 5 years, they study whether you are as strong as Isaiah or not. They want to know if the experience of alternative realities confirms your call. Anyway, I was rejected from the study because I have mental illness in my family. We're deep into the conversation, they're really loving me because, by the way, they don't have any clergy who want to do it. And so they're really desperate. And we had like 45 minutes of a call and was I what is called a hallucinogenic naïf? Yes. I may have the 60s brand written all over me, but I didn't do drugs. I even did what Bill Clinton says he did, but I really did. I didn't inhale. I just made believe I was inhaling. I was that kind of kid. So I'm a hallucinogenic naive, never had them before, so I qualified on the big, strong thing. And we get into the questions, everything's going great, I'm in decent enough health, blah, blah, blah. And then they say, is there any mental illness in your family 2 generations back or less? And I say, well, yes. My grandmother was in a mental institution while my mother was age 2 till 5, having a severe postpartum depression. And they said, oh, no, you flunked. So I had this disappointment at being rejected, but I was very interested in this notion of being able to experience an alternative reality in a controlled medical setting. But it's not for me. Lifelong meditators are also being studied, by the way, if anybody's interested. But this brings me back to this text, and here it is. At least Isaiah wasn't rejected. He was actually recruited by the angels. The new work with clergy and psilocybin harks back to a famous study by a Harvard researcher in 1962, some of you may know it, called the Good Friday Experiment. During an Easter worship service, 10 seminary students were given psilocybin and 10 received a placebo drug in order to compare the nature and extent of whatever mystical experience they had during the liturgy, one with the other. And one of the seminarians who got the psilocybin went on to write about it extensively and to say that it made all the difference for the rest of his life. He even uses the language, he was burned by the experience in the same way that Isaiah might have been. This is him speaking. What the psilocybin did for me was reframe what I thought mystical experience was all about. I expected it to involve the basic symbols and language of religion, but it had more to do with the garbage that was going on inside me. And I was able to confront all the things that were holding me back and say, boy, they're small. It reframed and enlarged my experience. So, profound spiritual alternative states of consciousness, often called revelations, are touchstones in the histories of most religions. They may even be found in their origins. For all we know, we started with some kind of big bang of ecstasy or goodness. You know Moses and the burning bush. You know Isaiah's temple vision. You know Paul's vision on the road to Damascus that turned him from Saul into Paul. And theologian Paul Tillich calls these experiences the really real God, as though somehow there was another God, you know, the one you hope you can pray to, but the really real God is the one you experience, and again, mystically. Mircea Eliade, who has studied mysticism in multiple cultures, was a professor of mine long ago in Chicago, and he always was asking us students whether we ever felt music, like really, really felt music, as unbearably beautiful, or was there ever a vast void in us that was completely fulfilled? And we were all seminarians, and we sat there looking at each other and saying, yeah, sort of, but not really, really, really. So Isaiah's commission in this multiple set of contexts is really quite wild. He is instructed by the seraphim to help the people have alternative reality experiences. Listen to what he's told to go out and do. This is the King James Version, which we don't have in the bulletin. Make the heart of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears. Instead, let them understand with their heart and convert and be healed. He's really undermining the common senses on behalf of wider senses. So what commission do we have? Do we visit the children on the border, wearing jackets that say, "I don't really care"? Do you? Do we see with our eyes and hear with our ears, or do we go to the border and really care with fat hearts? Right now, things are not getting worse. As the quote on the front of the bulletin says, they are getting uncovered. We are seeing, not just with our eyes and hearing, not just with our ears, but seeing and hearing with our hearts. It's different. Racism has always been with us. And now you think, oh yeah, they'd let another one of those policemen go. People have always been separated from their families and been being deported. But now, with the cries of those children on the border, you have to see it with your heart, not just see it in a headline. You see, the more you flounder, and the more I flounder, the quote, worse it gets, or more uncovered it gets, the more available we are to alternative or mystical experience. The more you take the masks off of racism or borders or a healthcare system that's been destroyed, the more you will see. If you can't get into a psilocybin study, or if the angels seem to have lost your phone number, your address, and your emails, you might think about something much more simpler. I know we all want to do something and are walking around spanking ourselves for not doing something. But what about another way? What about becoming more available to alternative realities? What about getting lost? What about getting rid of your GPS? What about intentionally getting lost? In a book called The Efficiency Paradox by Edward Tenner, he really goes after this business of how our devices are connecting us much too strongly and carefully to existing reality, almost as though we were imprisoned by that. Lost? No, I know exactly where I am. I'm here, here, and here. We are much too engaged with the way things actually are, so engaged that we may not be able to see or imagine alternative realities. So Tanner advises way losing as opposed to way finding. Just say, you're lost. We're lost. We're just lost. I have lost my way. And that opens things up to what he calls instructive disorientation, wild goose chases, dead ends. And here is critique of Google. Google Maps and Google Street View can still be used for exploration, but the Google mission statement is anti-mystical. Hear it. Organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. That gets rid of randomness, curiosity, the value of occasionally disorganized information. The conditioning of our expectations by representations of reality did not begin with electronic maps or online image sharing. Even in the heyday of print, some people liked to go to Europe or the Grand Canyon and not bring a map with them, right? Openness to alternative reality is going out of the house without a map. It is the lost art of getting lost. And one more from Tenner. The inefficient wanderer, on the other hand, will be using his or her time more efficiently by discovering what is less documented or even undocumented. Imagine paying attention to something that was undocumented. So as more and more troubling matters do get uncovered, I'm thinking that getting lost more is a good idea, or getting high, or praying that the seraphim find your address, because we can live in an alternative, God-soaked reality with the seraphim on behalf of paying better mind and heart to this reality. Amen.